Powkiddy are typically hit and miss with their products. 1 in 5 are okay, 1 in 10 are usually great. And previously we reviewed the RGB30, which was their 1 in 10. It was an adorable little handheld with a 1x1 display that did well and has become very popular. And now we have the Powkiddy RGB20SX that wants to take the 1x1 display further in a vertical format. But the big question is it worth the $90 price tag? No. What are the specs? This features a 1.8 GHz RK3566 ARM quad-core CPU, 1 GB of RAM, a 4-inch 1x1 display that has a nice ratio of 720 by 720. It has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, a 5000 mAh battery capacity, mini HDMI out, and USB-C charging. Visually, I kind of dig the way it looks. I have a yellow version and a transparent blue version, each giving off a completely different vibe. The 4-inch display takes up most of the room and admittedly makes the buttons look a little cramped underneath it, but I am happy with what display Powkiddy has chosen to use. It's bright, colourful, has good viewing angles and features no annoying branding around the bezels. I did notice, however, at about 80% or more brightness, the colours do seem to wash out a little bit, so I recommend keeping this at around about 80% for full, crispy, saturated colours. It's also worth noting that the display isn't touchscreen, which I'll get onto shortly. The chin of the device features a lot of buttons, and I would say it does look cluttered, even if they've kept that adorable face-looking function button. The D-pad used, however, isn't the best. It feels a little soft and there's little to no response to any direction once it's pressed down, which is a little disappointing. This certainly needs a lot of work, and I'm definitely not surprised that it passed Powkiddy's quality control team, if that even exists. The action buttons are fine, however. They're a nice size and aren't high gloss, so they're not going to get sweaty at all. The analog sticks used do the job, and they've certainly been upgraded from older Powkiddy handhelds, which is good to see, but they are not whole joysticks, which I know some of you won't be a fan of. However, this is only a $90 handheld. The whole joysticks kind of trickle into the $100 plus handheld range at the moment. The start and select buttons are incredibly clicky. They're loud and just not fun to press, and because they're so close to the analog sticks, I found myself accidentally pressing them now and then too, which is quite annoying. I wish these were designed just like the D-pad because they need softening up. Between the buttons you will find a small but very loud speaker, which works well, but at times, especially after I power back on my device from sleep mode, it would start to glitch, making weird scratching noises that would only stop if I jumped into a game or restarted it. Sometimes it would just randomly fix itself too, and this happened almost daily.
What the hell? Listen to that. It's like it's trying to whisper. Oh, and now it's back on.
There's little bugs like this that keep popping up on general Powkiddy products. For example, there's the battery percentage icon, which just stays at 0%, will jump to 100 and then back to 0% randomly throughout the day, even though I've been using it for hours on end. Around the bottom and sides, you'll find 2 USB-C ports, a headphone jack, volume buttons that can't be held and must be pressed multiple times to change the volume, a mini HDMI out port, an on-off button, and a reset button that sits directly next to the power button. The amount of times that I've just quickly pressed the side, bang, reset, that's not what I want, and that ain't fun. Flipping the device over, you'll be greeted with the 4 shoulder buttons and the large bottom that houses the 5000 mAh battery pack. I've said it many of times on my reviews, I am not a fan of these shoulder buttons. They're poorly designed, feel cheap, and are not ergonomic at all, so I was pretty disappointed when I saw that there was no change here. This is a common occurrence with Powkiddy products. They just have a history of cutting corners, and the biggest gripe with me about this product is the shoulder buttons and the emulation, which we'll get onto now, because the shoulder buttons they just look like SpongeBob or somebody should be using them, and it's not ergonomic at all. Like, change them, please. The layout of the entire device is, albeit comfortable. The big battery adds weight towards the bottom, and the enormous screen just captivates you away from anything else. The plastic shell too is nicely finished in matte and doesn't feel flimsy or thin at all, so it wraps up the device to feel of great build quality, which is surprising for a Powkiddy product. Turning on the RGB20SX, I noticed that it was using Rocknix, which is a great choice of Linux OS for rock trip devices and was a fork of Gel OS, but it just shows signs of performance issues all the time. The front end pre-installed though is super sleek. It's very simple, looks clean and features some nice artwork and can easily be given to a child or a newcomer to understand. Once you choose your console, you'll be greeted with a list of games which shows box art and a screenshot too, making it even easier to work with out of the box. The controls for most consoles were also set up perfectly straight out of the box too, but can be tweaked in the emulator settings should you come across something that needs changing. When you jump into a game, I was immediately thrown off because of the function button that just doesn't want to work. And the way to get into your emulator settings to save your game and do all of your shenanigans can be accessed by pressing select and X at the same time. I have no idea why Powkiddy didn't just use the function button as it should or set it up straight out of the box to go into the emulator settings, because naturally that's what a user will press because other handhelds in the space do that. So I didn't actually end up using this function button at all, really. There's something a little bit suspicious as well that I want to clear up. I purchased the blue unit from Powkiddy's official website on their pre-sale. This came loaded with the Rocknix OS, which has a lot of issues, whereas a third party sent me a review sample on this yellow version here, which came preloaded with Gel OS, and this does run far better in my opinion, but there's still a load of issues. For example, I was playing PSP, testing that out. You can see here on the video that it's poor performance. And when I came out of the game, it just crashed straight off the bat. So there is still a lot of issues with each OS, but I'm very aware that Rocknix performs far worse. In terms of emulation, I found myself playing 3 specific consoles the most. The first being Nintendo DS because of the square screen. It worked well with stacking both of the screens on top of each other instead of switching between them like you would on a typical 16:9 display. This was a lot of fun and is one of the main advantages of buying a 1:1 display over a 16:9 one. The only disappointing thing, and it's pretty major, no touchscreen. So if you did want to use the touchscreen, you have to use the right analog stick and press it to activate it, which can be cumbersome in some games, but I found myself getting around it with some games like Pokemon and stuff, which you don't really need to use on occasion. Next is Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Again, because of the 1:1 display, these games look absolutely stunning on here. It almost feels like a cheaper analog pocket when I'm playing because the 720p display makes everything look so damn clear. And this is where the handheld shines. Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, just lovely on a 4-inch screen. I originally wanted to play my Game Gear games on here, as it's one of my all-time favorite handheld consoles. You can see the trend here, right? Square-ish display games. That's the go-to on these things. The issue I had was that Sega Game Gear games was showing signs of slowing and also crackling audio, which surprises me because Game Gear games can be emulated on a potato. And this is where a lot of the issues lie. Performance on the RGB20SX is hit and miss, and mostly not enjoyable at all. I tried testing N64, PSP, and Dreamcast on here, but it's just awful. With the specs that this has, it should be running N64, Game Gear, and PlayStation 1 games flawlessly, but it just can't do it. I believe it's the Rocknix OS that is actually slowing this down. It's not the hardware at all, which is surprising because Powkiddy surely tested all of these games before they shipped it, right? Right? I was bumping into emulation issues just a few minutes after getting it out of the box. Like every review, I review these handhelds straight out of the box as if a newcomer had purchased it, and unfortunately, it's a half-baked product as of now. I see some community members having better experience with installing an older version of Gel OS on here, opening up far better emulation performance, but that's now incredibly complicated to do after the team's recent announcements of stopping work on this old Linux OS. So as an average consumer, I can't imagine many will want to do that, making this a generally bad handheld right now, even if it has the specs and potential to be a great device. They could send over-the-air updates, but this is Powkiddy we're talking about, and it's proof in the pudding that I don't think they care a lot about the products that they push out. They just gamble, they change up a few of the specs and the screens and the designs and go, let's see if people want to buy it. And then they expect users like us to go, oh, I don't really like the OS, it's a bit buggy, let me change that and do all the work and research and find out how to download it and do all of the formatting of my SD card. No. You, Powkiddy, should be making this a flawless gaming experience straight out of the box if you want people like me to recommend it. So this is a fairly short review because I don't want to put much spotlight on this device. My recommendation right now is to hold fire on this device. It's not yet ready. It's half-baked, it's not finished, and I believe there's a lot of work that Powkiddy should be doing on this device to get it ready. If the OS was flawless and it could emulate N64 and Dreamcast and all the others pretty well, I would say yes, this is probably worth the, what is it? I think you can get a $20 off code on their website, so it makes it like $70. I would probably say, yeah, it's becoming worth it, but it's just not there yet. And I don't think people want to take the risk of purchasing it. There's still hardware issues that they need to overcome and stuff, but I think majority of the problems right now is software focus, which they do need to change. Again, Powkiddy, this is a beautiful device. I love the way it looks. The screen is gorgeous, yet you cut corners again. And there we go. The review of the Powkiddy RGB20SX. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit subscribe, and if you want to get extra benefits and a welcome kit, hit us up on Patreon because that will help us through this very cumbersome time that we're having with Google at the moment. As per usual, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.